Enjoying going through the Gospel of John. We've been looking at it from this Messianic Hebraic view, and we always kind of start off and review what we see in the Gospel of John. It really comes out in verse 51 of chapter 1. He said, "Amen, amen, I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God going up and coming down on the Son of Man." So you get to see the kingdom coming in power and glimpses of the reign of the Messiah and what that looks like and what that will be like. And so that's where we are. We just finished up with the conversation between Yeshua and the Samaritan woman last week. But some of the things that one of the interesting things that we saw that was pointed out was some of these passages, and again, this is really all we're going to show, but this is some neat stuff. He says, Yeshua is talking to his disciples, 4 more months and then comes the harvest. Don't you say, can't you kind of predict and have an idea of what's right in front of you, of what's coming up in the days ahead? You can look 4 months down the road and have an idea of what's coming. But even when we can do that, sometimes we can miss what's right in front of our face. And this is one of those moments for the disciples. They were missing something that came right in front of them. He says, "Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields. They are white and ready for the harvest." And we know that he was talking about people. But what was really interesting to look at is that the crowd of Samaritan men were coming to him. Coming from town, as soon as the disciples came back, he's talking to the Samaritan woman at the well. The disciples show up, the woman drops her stuff and runs back to town, and the next thing the disciples see is this group of men coming from town, and they're probably wondering, oh man, how much trouble are we in now? We're probably going to receive a beatdown from this men. What did she tell them when she got back to town? She could have told them that we attacked her, that we assaulted her, all kinds of things, and they're coming back for vengeance. And yet Yeshua says, hey, lift up your eyes and look at the fields. This isn't a moment of fear. This is an opportunity for the kingdom because they are white and ready for the harvest. And the interesting thing about the Samaritans, at least the modern Samaritans, and we speculate that was probably the case then, as well, that when you look at the Samaritans, they look like that. They wear white. And so when he says, look at the fields, they are white under the harvest, he's pointing at all of that group of men that's coming their way wearing this white that they're probably afraid of, that they would have probably walked right past as they were going into town to get food. And he's saying, look at the fields, look around you. It's white under the harvest. All of those Samaritans can be included in the kingdom of God. But you didn't see it. And so who got to experience the benefit and the blessing of being the reaper in this situation? The woman did. The woman did. We get no indication that the disciples invited anyone from town to come and meet Messiah. But the woman did. She brought them all to be witnesses of things. And so we get to see this moment where many of the Samaritans from that town put their trust in him because of the word of the woman testifying, he told me everything I ever did. When the Samaritans came to him, they kept asking him to stay with him. He stayed there 2 days, and many more believed because of his word. And they kept telling the woman, it's no longer because of your words that we believe. We've heard for ourselves. Now we know that this really is the Savior of the world. That's where we're at. We just finished that last week, and that's been a fun study to look at. We're at this one. It's still in John chapter 4, but we're coming to what they call the second sign of the kingdom. And it's really a story about one man from Capernaum, but we're going to be ending up talking about two. Because it's really an interesting kind of thing. The second sign and 2 men from Capernaum. So we're starting in verse 43. It says, after the 2 days that he was there in Samaria, he went on from there into the Galilee. Now Yeshua himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So when he came into the Galilee, they welcomed him, for they had seen all that he had done at the feast in Jerusalem, since they also had gone up to celebrate. So stopping right there, he stayed for 2 days in Samaria around all of these non-Jewish people. And this hill country, from Shechem, it makes sense. He's down here in Shechem, right around here. I know it's not the clearest picture, but this is the hill country. Remember, he had been down here along the Jordan. He had to walk uphill to get into the Shechem area. And so now he's walking along the mountaintops and such, and he's going into the Galilee. It makes sense that one of the first places he would go would be Nazareth, his hometown and such. And just north of that, it's believed, is one of the possible locations for the settlement of Canaan. But he's in there, in that area, and going through. Now it says, Yeshua himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his home country. It's similar to what he said back in chapter 1, verse 11, where he says, he came unto his own, but his own did not receive him. Right? So when did Yeshua say something like this, that a prophet has no honor in his own country? When he went to go visit Nazareth. One of those places is Luke chapter 4, verse 24. He said, truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. Now, why not? Why do you think a prophet is accepted in his hometown?
Well, they're used to you, and they saw you grow up.
Yeah. They knew all the stuff you tried to pull when you were a kid and get away with, right? Jealousy, yeah. People didn't like you. Didn't like your mom and dad. Or you did something, you threw a rock at my dog, or whatever else. Yeah. And his heritage was in question. Whether they knew the whole story, they probably didn't. But they probably would have judged, well, you were born before your parents were really married. Right? He's talking to them in the context of the days of Elijah. He refers to them in that, where there's this drought in Israel, where these many widows are in Israel, but Elijah was sent to the widow of Zarephath, a non-Jewish woman, and she received a blessing from him. There were many in leprosy he talked about, but only Naaman the Syrian was healed. So only Gentiles, and that when he refers to these days of Elijah, he's referring to the time when the Gentiles receive a blessing and his own people don't. And it's believed as Tishbite, that he might have very well have been a non-Jewish person himself. So no prophet is accepted in his hometown, and but this is just after that he had been saying some things that they were all amazed at his teaching. He rolls up the scroll and he says, "Today this is fulfilled in your hearing," and they were like, "Yeah, man, that's great. Can you go check the air conditioner for me, please?" Oh, you just did?
I think I lowered it.
But, so they had just accepted him. Then he started talking about this stuff with the Gentiles and said, "Now all in the synagogue were filled with rage upon hearing these things." It says, "Rising up, they drove him out of the town and brought him as far as the edge of the mountain on which their city had been built in order to throw him off the cliff." I mean, that's a pretty big swing in emotion and in response to him. But this is the moment where he says something like that, that no prophet is accepted in his hometown. And in a lot of ways, John kind of expects his readers to be familiar with that. He doesn't have to tell them that. They just like, now it's been said that Yeshua said this, that no prophet is accepted in his hometown. Now, a question. How is this a glimpse of the kingdom that's coming in power? How is this kind of moment, where he is saying, Yeshua has testified this, the prophet has no honor in his own country. How is this moment a glimpse of the kingdom coming in power? It's a little difficult to see, but it's really interesting. This is a foreshadowing of things to come for how the nation is going to respond to him as the Messiah. Okay? This is a glimpse of that. In Nazareth, in Luke 4, at first they liked what he said. He said, all were speaking well of him, marveling at the gracious words coming out of his mouth. But then came rejection. And it was over this issue of the blessing going to the Gentiles, of the Gentiles being included. Now, the kingdom of God, and we've talked about this already here in John, the kingdom of God has always been about Jew and Gentile being separate or together. Jew and Gentile coming together. Going back to that conversation with Nicodemus, that the kingdom is bigger than what you just expect. It's his love for the world that he gave his only begotten Son. It's not the time that the nations are going to be judged. It's not the time that you can rejoice in their rejection of God or God's rejection of them. This is one of those moments where God is going to be reaching out to them to bring them in. Okay? So, the kingdom has always been about Jew and Gentile coming together. So this is following the pattern in the book of Acts. Yes?
And also, it kind of reminds me of Jonah.
Okay.
When the word goes out to, the enemies of God, and then,
Jonah doesn't want to go.
Jonah doesn't want to go, but he also, once the word is given, he expects, okay, now there's a witness against them, be rid of them.
Yeah. So I've given the message, they're going to reject it, and God's going to bring the fire. And he's like, man, I knew when I gave the message that they might repent and that you might show mercy on them, and I really didn't want you to do that. Yeah. So there's that sense of things. So right here, though, they liked what he had to say until he offered it to the Gentiles. Then they get mad. Isn't that the pattern in the book of Acts? At first, when it's proclaimed on the day of Pentecost and such as that, there is an initial acceptance. 3,000 were added to the kingdom that day. Even more are added in the days ahead. But then it starts crossing those boundaries to the Samaritans. Then it starts crossing the boundaries to the Gentiles. And there becomes a greater and greater rejection among the Jewish people for the Messiah, for the message of Yeshua. But there's also with that, in that, even though there's an increasing rejection and hostility, there's also the promise of a future acceptance when both Jew and Gentile are going to be one. Right? So this is the pattern of the kingdom. Initial acceptance, then once the Gentiles are included, there's a rejection, but there's that promise of a future reception again. And here we are back in John. When he came into the Galilee, they welcomed him. Okay? There was an acceptance. There was a welcoming to that. But this is contrasting to the treatment that he had received before. So what was it that really changed this time? What was it? Why is he being welcomed now? Whereas before, he wasn't. Of course, John provides the answer. Well, I'm missing the second part. The second part of that is that he says they had seen all he had done at the feast. That's Passover, because we were just coming out of all of that. They'd seen what he had done at the feast in Jerusalem, since they also had gone up to celebrate. Okay? this is akin to what you see, what happens with like a small town, superstar athlete. Okay, y'all know how this works. He is so good amongst his own competition, amongst the small town boys and kids. I mean, he just blows right past them on everything, and everybody thinks he's the best. And then he gets a scholarship to go to state college, whatever it is. And then what do people say about him? Well, he's good around here, but let's see how he does up there amongst the big boys. Let's see how he does once he gets among some real competition. And so this is seems like it's one of those kind of moments. Let's see what he does when he has to go up to Jerusalem. They'd heard the stories about the local boy making some waves, and they'd heard these accounts of him doing certain things, but it was always in a small town. They might have heard just one person kind of telling the rumor and the story of things, but it doesn't really happen. Things don't really happen. It doesn't really get really noticed and believed until it happens on the big stage in Jerusalem for the leadership there to witness. And not only did the leadership get to witness it there in Jerusalem, so does everybody else who had gone up to the feast. They got to see Yeshua's miracles. They got to hear his teachings during the feast, and he held his own. More than that, really. But the powers could not refute him or shut him down. Back in chapter 2, verse 23, it says that when he was in Jerusalem for the Passover, during the feast, many believed in his name, seeing the signs that he was doing. So this is no longer a secret based on rumors, built on a small town. They'd heard him do something. This is now on the big stage. They had seen it for themselves. The leadership had a chance to interact with him and shut him down if he was fake, and they didn't do it. So everything now was public. Everything now has been witnessed, and a lot of it has been verified. That yes, he did really do those things. There's a lot of people that talk about it. So they welcomed him because they had seen all of those things. And so he went again to Cana of Galilee, verse 46, where he had turned the water into wine. Okay. Now there was a nobleman whose son was sick in Capernaum, and when he heard that Yeshua had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and begged him to come down and heal his son, for he was about to die. All right? So when you look at some of these things, he's come up from the south, along the routes in the hill country, to Nazareth, more than likely, and then he's made his way up to Canaan, whereas Capernaum is up here. And so the interesting thing about all of this is that, that for him to go from Capernaum to Cana is pretty much all uphill. He's coming from the lower point where this lake is collecting. He's going uphill to get to a place like Cana. It's about a day's walk from there. This says 18 miles from Magdala to Cana, but then there's a distance between there. So overall, he's probably going 25 plus miles. And it says that he is a nobleman. Where'd that go? Basilikos. I'm probably not saying that correctly. Basilikos. Well, it's from where we get the word basilica, which is kind of how would you describe a basilica? It's a church or a royal building, right? I was putting it out there. What would you say?
Well, it began as like it's sort of like antechambers to the forum as well. Mm-hmm. And then like places of business or,
where the nobles could retire away from the view of the
crowd. Mainly business houses or official places of justice or interaction. Mm-hmm.
So, in any event, it says, someone who's belonging to a king, kingly, royal, a regal of a man, the officer or minister of a prince, a courtier, subject to a king. But then I saw this one definition was befitting or worthy of a king, someone who is royal. And I've been chewing on this one for a little while, and I'm trying to make some sense of it. And because the way we as I'm speculating, and I know you warned me against that, but I'm speculating a little bit because how this is typically translated to us as Gentiles is that he's a royal official, he is a nobleman of some kind, he's up there amongst the legal people in charge. I'm kind of wondering, and I have no way of knowing for sure, I haven't had time to really look into it, but I kind of wonder if this is a guy who is also potentially of the Davidic line. No, of the Davidic line. But that he because we know that they've been preserving who is in line, who is the heirs of the throne and such like that. They've been preserving some of that knowledge. They've been keeping track of who's related to who. So where that Mary and Joseph, they know to go down to Bethlehem because why? Why did they go down to Bethlehem for the tax when Jesus is being born? Because he is of the house and the line of David. So people are keeping track of that kind of stuff. Vicki, you were going to say?
I was going to say, what people just said about the Maccabees, they were also keeping track of that line.
Yeah.
And that line was also still very much around and influential in the time.
Yes, even more so than the
So I just kind of wonder if from a Messianic, a Jewish perspective, if this was somebody who had another claim to the throne of David or the Maccabean, whatever. I just kind of wonder if that's the context that they look at it in, whereas we don't see that because we don't think in those terms. But again, that's just speculative on my part, and I have no way of knowing for sure. But this is a guy who he's coming from Capernaum. It's about a walk uphill. It's about a day's walk. Now, in order for him to do that, that means that when Yeshua showed up in Cana, somebody left Cana and has made his way down to Capernaum and has been talking about it along the way, and then he has to hear about it, and then he has to make his way back. So it's a day to get down there, and if he leaves immediately, it's a day to get back. So Yeshua has been in town for at least 2 to 3 days before this guy even shows up. So someone made the trip down to Capernaum, and then he had to make the trip back up. Everybody had heard about his miracles on the big stage, so this person, decides to go back. And he is the one who is asking. My translation, says that he begged. It's typically you question them, you entreat them to come back. Because of the nature of the situation, they put a little more emotion into it, saying that he's begging him to come back. But somehow or another, he says, come back up here. He heard that Yeshua had come from Judea. He went to him and asked him or begged him to come down and heal his son, for he was about to die. So what does the guy already know? What does the royal official already know about you, or think he knows about Yeshua? He already thinks that he can do something about it. He already thinks he can heal him in some way. Does he know everything about Yeshua? Does he know that he's the Messiah? Does he know any of that stuff yet? No. All he knows is that maybe he can help my son because he's about to die. That's what he cares about at this point.
I think he's heard rumors.
And he's probably heard the rumors. He's heard the things that he did in Jerusalem. So, there's a buzz going on about what Yeshua has done. So, but what he knows is he already thinks that he has a chance to heal my son. And so then the next thing that we read is verse 48. Then Yeshua said to him, unless y'all see signs and wonders, you will never believe. Now, is this a statement just to the man, or is it a statement to the whole crowd in Canaan? It's at least, it says he said to him, but when he says to you, it's plural. So he is saying it to you all. It's to everybody who's witnessing this thing. He's saying it to a larger group of people. Now, it was this belief or this understanding, maybe Yeshua can do something. It was this desperation that brought him. Do you think he's ready to become a disciple yet? Probably not. He's not ready to declare Yeshua the Messiah yet, right? He wants a miracle. He doesn't necessarily want a new master, right? If he is a royal official, if he's a subject who's of the king, and he is coming as a statesman, so to speak, he's already got a king. He doesn't need another one. Okay, so but he is coming there. Now, so that guy, he's not really looking for a new master. And the people, they just kind of seem to want another show. Because where is he? He's in Canaan. What happened in Canaan? Well, his first sign, his first miracle, his public sign where he turned the water into wine, it was a very joyous occasion. It was a very celebratory occasion. And they would love to see something like that again. This is an entertainment form in a lot of fronts. Now, what's the problem with when it comes to miracles? When people start seeing and looking for signs, do signs and miracles really do a whole lot for fostering a long-term faith? Not really.
Yeah, you say it, people see this a lot tonight. People want to see the miracle and the hand of God working miraculously, supernaturally.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to submitting to His Lordship, that's a whole new thing.
Right, it is. When people want to see the miracle, they don't really want to live the life. And that's kind of where this is at. This is where this statement is coming from. It's, miracles don't really foster a long-term faith. And you hear people, atheists and things, make the kind of statements and such, well, if God were real, why doesn't He just make Himself more obvious? Why didn't He just write His name up on the clouds, so to speak? If He would do that, then I'm sure I would believe.
Really fly.
Yeah. Well, and okay, let's say, God does that. Do you really think they would believe? No. Not really, because they don't want to have that authority over them in the first place. So even if God did that, they probably wouldn't believe, and if they did, it probably wouldn't last very long. And the truth of the matter is God has done that. He has written His name in the cloud, a cloud of fire by night, a cloud of smoke by day. That's one of the points that Philip Yancey makes in his book, Disappointment with God, with the whole Exodus story. They were seeing miracle after miracle after miracle, just magnificent things. And yet as soon as miracles didn't happen on the time that they think they should, it was back to complaining. It was going back to, let me get back to an idol. Let's go back to Egypt. It didn't actually foster a trust or a commitment or a long-term faith, even though they had the miracle right in front of them. Does Jesus know that? Yeah, He knows that.
When the end-time prophecy says people are going around looking for the signs and wonders.
Mm-hmm. And the end-times prophecy suggests that the Antichrist or different other characters in that scenario is going to be able to do miracles and signs and wonders and such. And he's going to lead a lot of people astray. So whatever form that takes, there's going to be a show. But it's not necessarily going to be of God. Okay? So Bring forth what?
A tape player.
Okay.
And he played the tape, supposedly, hearing cries from hell.
Okay.
Well, if you win people to the Lord by pushing hellfire and brimstone, that's not really going to last very long. Because the devil's going to say,
Yeah, that's not the best foundation.
no. It's needed for people to know.
All right, y'all go ahead and leave. You're missing the best part later. Too bad.
We'll leave on that. It's needed, but the love of God is going to be.
Yeah. Now, some people do respond to getting kind of scared and woken up to the reality of judgment, but I sure hope they don't stay there, because that's not really the place to build a lifelong commitment of faith. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So he also knows that it can be started.
Yes.
Not necessarily whether they stay.
Now, but remember, the guy already believes something. He already believes he can do something. So it's almost like he's saying, unless you see the signs and wonders, you're not going to believe with a lifelong kind of commitment of things. Hello. I sure hope not. Now, and I didn't even write any of that stuff down. But I forgot. Don't you hate it when you have thoughts that you want to include and you don't remember to write them down? But then we come to the man. Yeshua says that statement. Unless you see the sign, you're not going to believe. And the man is not interested in the show. All right. He says, "Sir, just come down before my child dies." That's all he's really interested in. He's not interested in what the crowd wants. He just wants his son to be healed. Yeshua tells him, "Go, your son lives." The man believed the word that Yeshua said to him and started off. Okay? So this is very personal for this royal. It's not a show. Yeshua isn't interested in putting on a show for the crowd, but he is interested in meeting the need of the man. Okay? If Yeshua wanted to make it a show for the crowd, what would he do? Well, he would start walking, don't you think, going down the road. The whole crowd that was with him, what do you think they would do? They'd probably all go with him. They would show up at the guy's house with a mass of people. That's more than likely what would happen. But Yeshua is not interested in putting on a show so they can just see a miracle and believe. But Yeshua is sowing a seed of faith in this man, this important person, whoever he is. You know, he's a royal official. He's somebody higher up. If you go with that speculation that he might be somebody of the line and such, do you think there's a lot of pressure on him not to accept Yeshua as Messiah? I mean, even if he just works in Herod's household, yeah, to say that there's another king, oh yeah. Important people aren't supposed to make those kind of pronouncements on about the common issues and such. So what we see in this, the man believes. He believes the word of Yeshua. And he starts off for home. This is very interesting. There's another moment that is a lot like this. Because you think about this. Well, there's another moment, let me put it like this. When he was going to Jerusalem, and he was passing between Samaria and the Galilee, so he's going in the opposite direction. He entered a certain village. 10 men with leprosy, with saras, came toward him. They stood some distance away. They raised their voices, saying, "Yeshua, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests, the Kohanim." And as they went, they were cleansed. How do you know that these men believed Yeshua's statement? because they obeyed. How do you know that the man believed Yeshua's word? Because he started back for home. He didn't say, no, you have to come with me. If he didn't really believe him, he would try to insist on talking Yeshua into coming with him. But the fact that he accepted the word and started back for home demonstrates that he believed it. Okay? And that's kind of an important thing. So he asked Yeshua to come. He might have been a little disappointed that when he doesn't come, but he accepts the statement and that pronouncement of healing. And that is a difficult concept for the Jewish people because of the way they understand and their concept of blessing. Okay? How do the Jewish people understand blessing? Does it happen typically from a distance? Or is it very hands-on? Okay? The Jewish concept of blessing is you come and you lay your hands on it. That's how they practice things. You see that even in elements in the New Testament with that you receive power through the laying on of my hands. It's a very close, it's a very personal type of moment where they're transferring, so to speak, this idea of blessing to them. So for him to accept, just on his word, that his healing would take place and to start for home was probably hard for him. Okay? But this is also similar to another man who came from Capernaum to meet with Yeshua. Y'all figured out who that is yet? It's the centurion. And there's two parallel passages. Matthew chapter 8 and Luke chapter 7. It says, "Now when Yeshua came unto Capernaum, a centurion came begging for help. 'Master,' he said, 'my servant is lying at home, paralyzed horribly and horribly tormented.' Yeshua said to him, 'I'll come, and I will heal him.'" So his understanding of Yeshua is, I'm going to come, and I'll do it on the spot. When Luke talks about it, there's an interesting parallels here. When Yeshua finished all his teaching or his drash and the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. A certain centurion who had a valued slave who was ill and about to die, when he heard about Yeshua, he sent who? Jewish elders from the town, asking him to come and save his slave. Now, some critics will say that this is they'll say that, well, they're telling two different stories and things like that, and they'll use this as a point of, see, they don't know what they're talking about, you can't take this stuff as history. But, there again, it also has to do with how they understand and deal with a king and his representative. Because the traditional way of understanding, when someone is appointed to speak on behalf of someone, that person, it is as if that person is speaking for the one who sent them. So the Roman centurion sent other people to him, but in terms of the story, in terms of the meaning of things, it's as if the Roman centurion was there speaking in the spot. That make sense? Yes.
And similarly, Haman, when he was named King Ham, and all of his pronouncements would be written down, as if the king had said them.
Because he had the king's signet ring, he could write with the legal authority of the king. And so everything he said was as if the king said it. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. So, but it's interesting that he sends, obviously there's the centurion from Capernaum. He has, of all things, a servant or a slave that he is concerned about. And he sends these Jewish elders to meet him. And these Jewish elders were willing to go. That's unusual. And so the one sent in authority of speaks for as if the person is speaking for themselves. So they're trusted to speak, make an announcement or make this pronouncement. But then we get here, Matthew doesn't really change as far as this introduction. It says, when they, and this is the Jewish elders in Luke 7, came to Yeshua, they begged him earnestly, saying, he is worthy for you to grant this. This centurion, this non-Jewish person, for he loves our people and even built our synagogue. Isn't that interesting? Now, did he build and put up every rock by himself? Is that what it's talking about? It's that he what? He financed it. He paid for it. He paid for the work to be done. So, Luke tells us why the Jews are willing to do this for the centurion, because it's hard to believe otherwise. Why would they even go on his behalf? Well, they have found a synagogue in Capernaum, yes. Whether or not they think it's exactly this one, I wouldn't say for sure, because there might be more than one in town. That's the only one?
Because Capernaum was considered what we would call almost seminary town today.
Okay.
It was the heart in the Galilee for the rabbis.
Okay.
And the synagogue, the remains of the synagogue that are there now, are white limestone, but you can see it. It's relayed after a massive earthquake, I think it's in 67, which relayed over the course of the black basalt stone, and everything was built within Yeshua's day. Just the same course of stone.
Okay.
So what you're looking at today isn't what was there when Yeshua was there, but it's where exactly.
On the same spot. That's fascinating. That's good stuff. So he was considered a worthy Gentile. He paid for the synagogue, so he was at least in that category of a God-fearing Gentile. He might be a proselyte or a convert. We don't have that much information. But they obviously respect him. And he paid for these things. And Yeshua is willing to go. He knows he's going to a Gentile's house, right? He knows he's going, and he says, I'll come, and I will heal him. Yes?
Sometime back, 50 years ago, I was at the park, and this man was trying to get support of his ministry, and he was saying that Yeshua did not, he only came to the Jews, he didn't preach to the Gentiles. And so what we're saying today is he did heal.
Well, he does say things like that at times, where he says, he sends out his disciples, go only to the Jewish people, only to the lost sheep of Israel. I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. He says things like that. But you see his actions throughout the Gospels, and it's clearly something else is going on than an exclusive, I'm only here to talk to Jewish people. So there's more to it.
I was just going to say that when he said that, I went to the lost sheep of Israel, he's saying that there's only one woman.
A non-Jewish woman.
A non-Jewish woman, and grants her request.
Yes.
Correct. So,
yeah.
And then a lot of Israel is clearly in Hebrewism that all the laborers in the scripture were referring to the Gentiles that were gathered in.
And at least to the larger concept of right, because he's been building this idea in the Gospel of John already that the kingdom of God is bigger than what the Jewish people think it is. He's been trying to get them to see that this is a lot bigger. So Yeshua is willing to go. And so we get to Matthew chapter 8. He says, the centurion said, Master, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. Okay, parallel that with Luke. Yeshua started to go with them, and he wasn't far from the house, and the centurion sent friends to say to him, Master, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under his house. So even in Luke, he's not speaking for himself again. He sent some more friends to talk to him. That is why I didn't consider myself worthy to come to you, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. That's the parallel. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. It goes on and says, for I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I say to this one, go, and he goes. I say to another, come, and he comes. And I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. Luke is almost exactly the same at that point. But that whole idea of just say the word. Just speak with your authority, and I know and I believe that it will be done. That's the Roman Gentile kind of way, which is understood. It's built on authority and pronouncement. It doesn't need to be hands-on. It doesn't need to be in person. There's no need for a personal relationship in things or involvement. Okay, and that's in a lot of ways how they deal with their gods. The Gentiles and the Romans and the Greeks, they don't really want to be all that close to their gods. They just want to receive whatever they have to send their way. And so just say the word, from Caesar, whatever else. Caesar says the word, and I'm here to enact the word. Yes?
Also, this was a man who obviously respected the Jewish people.
Yes, he does.
It would, especially with the parallel in Luke, it would come across as if he's saying, I don't want to taint your reputation.
Mm-hmm.
He wants the healing for his slave, but he says he knows the rules. He knows what.
That Yeshua could be compromised by going to a non-Jew's house.
And teaching and stuff like that and stuff. So he's going to say, look, I don't want to taint your reputation. Just say the word and I'm good.
I believe, just from your pronouncement, that you can heal him even from a distance. Okay?
Now, she says that this is, what I'm saying in the scripture is, in Hebrews, where it says, do not cast away your confidence, which has great recompense in the reward. This man has confidence.
Yes, I mean, he trusted in the power or the authority that Yeshua had. And it might even have been against some of the suggestion or recommendation from the Jewish elders that he sent. Because the great thing about this is that the centurion already believes something. The ones who probably don't at this point are the Jewish elders. What do they get to see in this moment because of this? They get to see Yeshua do something. They get to see a witness, be a witness of his healing from a distance. And so they get to see that kind of a moment. Now, this is Yeshua's response, and it's very similar on both ones. When Yeshua had heard this, he marveled. And he said to those who were following, Amen, I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. He says he was amazed at him, turning to the crowd following. So he turns away from those he's talking to and tells everybody else who's been following, because they were all wanted to see this too. I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such great faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found his slave in good health.
That's the second time he told somebody that I have not found in Israel such great faith.
The woman who, with the crumbs at the table.
Mm-hmm. Has that one happened yet in the Gospels? I thought that was later in the Gospels.
Sure, but that was the other one where he said, I've not seen such great faith.
Right.
And the woman that gave her coin.
Yes. So, but he says, I have not found anyone in Israel with this kind of faith. That was kind of a bit of a potential, could be taken as an insult to those who were also standing around, including some of the elders that had come to him. Yes.
Just a little observation here, because the word centurion there, as far as in the Greek, it appears to mean a leader over 100.
Okay.
Okay, but nevertheless, he was a high-ranking official.
Yes.
That had a great amount of authority, and yet we read he had a lot of humility to him.
Yes, he did.
And this idea of humility and faith tend to relate together. But Yeshua talked about, they asked, his disciples said, increase our faith. In the very lesson he gives them on humility.
Well, there are some people, when they get to positions of leadership, love it.
They let it go to their head.
And they lord it over others, and they enjoy it.
And he warned his disciples about God.
Yes, he did. Yeah, this guy doesn't seem to have that issue. He still expects to be obeyed when he gives his announcement or whatever his decision is.
I'm not even worthy to.
Yeah.
He's kind of like John when he says, I'm not worthy to even untie your
sandals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you're right. He does definitely demonstrate that. And so here's...
I just want to make sure I'm clear, tracking with you. The point of bringing this illustration, this parallel record of the centurion, is to bring our focus on the faith that this man had. But I'm not forgetting, or I'm accurate to remember that your initial statement or initial presentation here in this passage is that this is actually a Jewish person in John who's coming to him. This official is some kind of Jewish official as opposed to a Gentile official. Am I right about that?
That's what it seems to be reading at. He's a royal official, probably of Herod's court and such like that. I'm still thinking that he is a Jewish person in John. Yes.
Well, and by the way, that's why I just didn't want to. I'm starting to get lost in what the parallel was, but I think I got it all right.
Okay.
I just wanted to affirm to you. I was just looking at that in verse 48, where it says, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." That's something that Yeshua, on more than one occasion, said when the paragraph begins with, "And to the Pharisees and the Sadducees they came and asked him for a sign, and he said, no sign will be given."
That's a good point.
Clearly a point given to Jewish people throughout the text. So
that is a good point.
That is a really good point because Paul says in Romans, Jews seek after signs.
There you go.
Yeah. So,
Thank you, Rick.
Well, why did they say, why did they try to convince Jesus to do this by saying he was worthy? Because it seemed that they had questions about whether Jesus was going to hear him because he was Gentile.
yeah, they were asked to do a favor, and they didn't necessarily believe everything that even the centurion did, but they get to be the beneficiary of witnessing what Yeshua does for him, and that's a good thing, because one of the things that this says, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. Can Gentiles demonstrate great faith? Yes, they can. What are they lacking? Because some Jews, especially in their day with Shammai and stuff, didn't believe that the Gentiles could demonstrate faith and could not have a relationship with God. That was one of the issues. What they are lacking is the truth of the Word of God and the identity of who God is. So what do they need? It's not that they can't believe. What do they need? They need witnesses. They need people who are going to tell them, right, who God is and what His Word has to say. Okay? What if those who are authorized to speak on behalf of God and speak to the Gentiles on behalf of the King refuse to speak and keep it to themselves?
How can you keep it to yourself?
I understand. But the Jewish people, right, they are supposed to be what? They are supposed to be a light to who? To the Gentiles. They have been authorized by the King to speak on His behalf. And it is supposed to be as if He is speaking to them directly. That's the way the system works. Okay? But those who are off, what if someone who has been sent in the authority of the king goes but does not deliver the message that the king has given them to give? What's that? Well, that's like treason, right? So Jews were sent. Jews were sent by a Gentile to beg Yeshua to come to him, and he has always been willing to go, because the Father has been asking the Israelites to go to the Gentiles all along, so that the Gentiles would come to him. See, the Gentile is asking the Jews to say, please go ask your God, go ask Messiah, so he can come to me. And God has been up there saying, I'm sending you so they will come. I don't have to go to them. I'm sending you, and they will come. And they're out there trying to bang on the door to get in. Right? God has always been trying to get the Jewish people to go out and bring them back. And here you see a moment where the Gentiles are like, guys, I need you to go for me because I haven't been hearing it from you. Does that make sense? Kind of? See, Yeshua even commands his disciples to go to the whole world with that exact same mission. And it's interesting that Luke, he mentions the Jews, that they were the ones that were sent on his behalf, but then Matthew says something really interesting that is also along these lines. The next verse in Matthew chapter 8, verse 11 says, Moreover, I tell you that many will come from the east and the west, and they will recline at the table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be driven out into the outer darkness, and in that place will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then Yeshua said to the centurion, Go, as you have believed, let it be done for you. And the servant was healed in that same hour. So, this first part is describing what a lot of people look at as the gathering of God's people, right? Many will be brought in will come from the east and the west, right? And many in Yeshua's day believed, like Nicodemus did, that this is just talking about the Jewish people, or that it's just talking about the lost or the scattered tribes, right? But it's a lot bigger than that. It's a lot bigger than that. Now look at, do I have it in here? Isaiah chapter 11. It says, He will lift up a banner for the nations, and assemble the dispersed of Israel, and gather the scattered of Judah from the four corners of the earth. This is that coming from the east and the west kind of idea. It says, Ephraim's envy will end, those hostile to Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. This is some of that concept. But then look at verse 10. This is backing up a couple of verses. It says, It will also come about in that day that the root of Jesse will stand. The root of Jesse. Who's the root of Jesse? Yeshua is, Messiah is. It will stand as a banner for who? For the peoples. The nations will seek for him. The peoples, that it's a lot bigger than just the Jewish people by itself. Okay? The nations will seek for him, and his resting place will be glorious. Okay, this is a gathering, I'm going to back this up, of people from the east and from the west, from all over. They will go where? They will recline at the table. And what was that line from the song that we were talking about earlier? Rejoice at my place at the table. Yeah, pray for your grace, for I will. I swapped it. Joy at my place. Joy at my place. I will take joy in my place at the table.
That actually, the verse there, that is the code language.
It's the code language?
The code language.
Okay.
With Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob at the table. In fact, Sukkot was the festival that always looked forward to the ingathering of the nations.
Mm-hmm.
But the real kicker is the next one.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because room is going to be made at the table. And that's the hard part. Room will be made at the table. The sons of the kingdom is referring to who? The physical descendants of Abraham, will be driven out into the outer darkness. Okay, so not all those who are of Israel are Israel. Isn't that in places where Paul in the epistles talk about that? Not just because you're a physical descendant does not mean that you are a person who believes in God and that you've got an automatic pass.
Now therefore, those people who preaches and Jews don't need to be saved is Christian love.
Yes, they are. Because the Yeshua is the one upon whom the angels descend upon the Son of Man. He is the one who has control and has the access to who is able to go into heaven or go into where God is, into His presence. Okay? So, some physical sons of the kingdom will be displaced and others will be grafted in and granted their place. Okay? That's consistent with what we read in Romans 11 and such, with the whole idea of the branches being cut off so that you can be grafted in. You are a wild olive branch, that's talking about the Gentiles, and your place, a room was made for you to be grafted in. But then what does he say? You better not get your head all filled up in pride that a room was made for you. As if you're more special than they are. Yeah.
They actually passed a law this week, and a lot of Jewish people and rabbis and stuff are real upset about it because they passed a law, and it's kind of directed more at Judah only, and there's been some testing done, because like when the Jews went out of the law, when the Jews went out of the land, they left the poor behind and stuff. Blood-wise, DNA-wise, there's some really high percentages, even within the Palestinian community. But the point is these other rabbis and stuff are writing about is there are other people entitled to the land of Israel besides just Judah. And this new law makes other people secondary citizens. Now, myself personally, I think it shall be based on believing in Yeshua and what he's going to do. But their point is you can't just take it all and say only this and only this birthright thing and only, because then you're really excluding so many others out there that they believe are entitled.
And on a parallel note, there was a conservative rabbi who was just arrested and questioned because he was conducting weddings and stuff, which this was like the first example of somebody, the enforcement of a law saying that only the Orthodox can control a Jewish wedding.
And even some of the Orthodox who have a right to marry under the rabbinate aren't, because they don't want to give them that much authority, because basically they're saying if you're Messianic in here, or if you're out of land, and so they have a whole lot of people that are doing it, but yet they will bless being the two men, or Orthodox or something, not know. And so it's just totally messed up.
So yeah, so there are things ongoing right now that we're seeing take place that are demonstrating once again, that the rule and things that we're seeing now is not the Messianic fulfillment. So there are things that are to come. Man, I've got to get through this. Where am I? So all of this is consistent with what we see like in Romans 11. With being grafted in and such as that. But always remember what the goal is. The goal, we always got to keep in mind, do I have that in here? Oh. Is Revelation 10. And we started this in the beginning when we started meeting back up in March. Because days of the voice of the seventh angel when he is about to trumpet, that the mystery of God is completed, just as he declared to his servants, the prophets. So there is this mystery that has yet to be fulfilled. And we see that in Ephesians, of that definition of what the mystery is. He says in chapter 1, verse 9, he says, He made known to us the mystery of His will in keeping with His good pleasure, that he planned in the Messiah. The plan of the fullness of times is to bring all things together in the Messiah, both things in heaven and things on earth, all in him. In him we also were chosen, predestined according to his plan. Okay, so this mystery is being fulfilled. Where am I going? Where am I? Chapter 2, verse 15 says this. He says, the law code, the commandments contained in these regulations, but he says he did this in order to create within himself one new man from the two groups, making shalom, making peace, and to reconcile both to God in one body through the cross, by which he put the hostility to death. He came and proclaimed shalom to you who were far away, that's the Gentiles, and shalom to those who are near. Who is that? The Jewish people. Both of them had to have peace proclaimed, for through him we both have access to the Father by the same Ruach, by the same Spirit. And then chapter 3, verse 2 says, surely you have heard about the plan of God's grace given to me for you, that the mystery was made known to me by revelation, as I wrote briefly. I wrote before briefly. When you read this, you can understand my insight into the mystery of Messiah, which was not made known to the sons of men in other generations, as it has now been revealed by the Ruach to his holy emissaries and prophets. This mystery is that the Gentiles are joint heirs and fellow members of the same body and co-sharers of the promise in Messiah Yeshua through the good news. That's the goal. The goal is that the one new man might be seen and made complete and brought to fruition.
Do you know when the day of the Lord and the
That's a totally different question that I'm not going into, because we'll be here a whole lot longer. But the Ephesians, that's the goal of where our future is being taken to. Okay? That the mystery of God being fulfilled is the people of God, Jew and Gentile, coming together as one. So all the things that happen, however you think it's going to play out, is to make this goal take place. So going all the way back to John, the thing is, it's not about the show. It's not about the performance of things. And so the man has come and asked for a miracle, and he doesn't even get to witness it himself. He doesn't witness the actual healing, and nobody in the crowd actually witnesses the healing. He's told about it after the fact, and he has to believe it. Because while he was on his way down, his servants met him, saying that his son was living. That's back in John chapter 4, verse 51. So when Yeshua gave the pronouncement, and he believed it, and he started on his way back home, that means at some point they met in the middle somewhere. And it was probably a little further, closer to Capernaum than it was to Cana, because he was getting to go downhill while they were having to go uphill. But can you imagine before he ever got to talk to them, what do you think was going through his mind when he sees his servants coming up the road? He's probably assuming that they're going to tell me my son's dead. Now, but he believed, so maybe he didn't. But with his faith, he may have expected the good news. But so he asked them the hour when the boy began to get better, and they said the fever left him yesterday about the 7th hour. And that's another translation says that's about 1 o'clock, or that's just after what happens, just after the noonday prayers and such. So he got the good news that his son was living, and then it says the father. Now he's called the father. Realized that it was at the same hour Yeshua said to him, "Your son lives." Now he himself believed. Did he not believe before? Or was his faith increased?
It was increased.
It was increased. He believed his word and he went off for home. He believed something. But now it's like, yeah, now he really believed. And in fact, so is he, when he first came, he was asking for a miracle. He wasn't asking for a new master. Right? You remember that? It's been a while, I know. We've been talking a while. But now he's at the point where because of what he witnesses, he believes and he's ready for a new master.
And it more or less just confirmed what he already had believed.
Yes. So the miracle helped his belief.
But if you look at it, he could have believed that somebody had the power to do things. But I think that at the end, he gets his power to.
Yeah. So he believes, along with his whole household, so everything changes for this man. And it says Yeshua did this as the second sign after he had come again from Judea to Galilee. So this isn't the second miracle he's done. He's done other things, right? Because the people heard about a lot of things that he did in Jerusalem. But this is, it says, the second sign. So this is something significant about this one. The first one was in person at a wedding. This one is from a distance by decree, witnessed by a royal official, somebody high up, somebody important. And it's demonstrating a kingly authority. It's a glimpse of the authority of the kingdom and the king to those the world deems royal. The world calls this man a nobleman, a royal man, and yet who has greater authority? Yeshua does. Okay, this is really establishing the worthiness of Yeshua and who he is. Does that make sense? And I get into the speculation about what if he was of the Davidic line or of the line that you talked about, the Maccabean. Somebody who might think he has a claim to the Jewish throne on his own. If it was somebody like that who gets to witness this, then who's he going to tell everybody, well, that's not my place. That belongs to him. He's the Messiah. He's the one who should sit on the throne. That's where I thought that was interesting. Any other thoughts or